So Moishe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews, and he's reviewing their history. Again, this is the end of the 40 years. Morty Mikey. The end of the 40 years. Mikey, not in Lut. And he says, you see it there, the bottom quote. God led you by Midbar in the desert. Now he goes on to describe the desert like this. Godel, big, Neira, awesome, Nachash, snakes, Saraf, vipers, Akrav, scorpions, Vitzimoin, and thirst, Asher Ein Moin, where there's no water. Okay? That's a pretty graphic description of the desert that they traversed. And God, he's saying, and you survived all of that, and God protected you, and you flourished. You had the manna, and you had the well of Miriam, and you had the clouds of glory that protected you, and now God has brought you now to the banks, the eastern banks of the Jordan, and you're about to go to Yisrael. Again, you'll remember that the whole book of Devarim is a Fabrengen, exhortation, inspiration, teaching, and the mission statement, the send-off for the Jews that will enter into the land of Israel under Joshua. But to look at these words now a little bit deeper. The desert represents exile. At Yisrael is, of course, redemption. Mind you, had the Jews merited, it wasn't meant to be, but had they merited and not transgressed, then Moishe would have led them into Israel, and that would have been redemption, Mashiach, permanent and forever. It wasn't meant to be, because it's got to go deeper. In the words of Leonard Cohen, you want it darker. It's one of his last songs, if not his last song. You want darker from the darkness to reveal the greatest light.
Mm.
Yeah, you know the song. Okay, good. Ili Nishmas Leonard.
I didn't look at it like that.
Right, he's a good man. And he started to learn Chassidus. Yeah. Okay, so now the desert, let's look at the desert. The Rebbe explains this pasuk now. It's mindset. This pasuk is describing a mindset, an attitude that a Jew has to the desert, which is Golus. Not a good, it's all negative. So we're being warned, don't go down this, because this is where it's going to end up. Let's begin. The first description of the desert, it's Godel, it's big. It's a first error, but it's understandable, meaning to say, we're here in Golus, we're under the laws of nature at best, and sometimes even worse than that. You got to make a living. There's life, there's rules of nature. To have the attitude, it's a big world. That's the first step of, we were just talking earlier about the Jew is really the master. Last week, remember Yisrael? I think we spoke about Shema Yisrael. The Moishe tells you're Yisrael. The word Yisrael means leader. The first error is when you look at the world, and it's a big world there. You give it a reality, a power, a force that it appears to have, but the truth is it's not. But it's all here. The first thing, it's big. It's a big world. So already, what does that mean? We need to compromise a little bit, to negotiate. You know, it's a Shabbos, but, you know, if you look at this, really, I just made a little calculation. There's 5 descriptions here. It pretty much describes the big wave of immigration that came. 2.5 million Jews came to America. The biggest immigration was from the late 1800s to 1924. 2.5 million Jews, mostly in New York and Boston, these areas over here. Because believe it or not, then there were no immigration policies, there were no restrictions. Got in a boat, you came. That's when they started to making immigration laws. But there was a window there, and it was mainly from Russia they came. Russia, Poland, not Hungary, Russia and Poland, especially Russia. There was the pogroms, etc. Jews left in great waves. If you look at, it's 5 generations from that. The description here is pretty much what happened then. Listen, you'll hear generation after generation. So the first generation is coming from the old country, still Shabbos, everything's still there, but it's a big America, it's a big world here. Right? It's not the shtetl, it's not the old country, it's a new reality. Next step is Noira. Naira means fearful. So that's a descent. It's not just big, but I'm afraid already. There's the element of fear. That's the next descent. If we don't check it and we don't check our own attitude and reinforce and understand who we are, then from the step of a big world becomes an awesome world. And then comes Nachash. Now there's three creatures here. Snake, we call it a serpent. Snake, I said viper, snake, serpent, and scorpion. So this is what it says in the Gemara, that a snake's venom makes you cold. No, sorry, hot. Temperature goes up, that's how you die. What happens now is Nachash, the snake. The snake he starts to warm even, starts to adapt to American life. It's not so terrible, and he starts to embrace it and starts to get excited a little bit about it. Because he's successful, he's making $1, another $1. Not so bad. They came here from the old country, they were afraid. What's going to be the Yiddishkeit, the big world, an awesome world, and then the third generation already. They're sent to secular schools, getting college education, you know, this levels of assimilation. So the next thing is Nachash, the serpent, the snake, you get warming to the world. Next stage is Saraf. The word Saraf, actually, Sarefa means a fire. You don't just warm to the world. He's completely burnt up, completely consumed. Shkoyach. Hear the word Sarefa, it's a Hebrew word. Can be, you know, the whole thing is making a living, be successful. My son should be a doctor, lawyer. You know, Yiddishkeit is receded to the subconscious, the backbench, Hashanah, Yom Kippur, high holidays. So from being warm, Nachash, to the next level is not just warm, but sort of completely caught up, passionate about materialism, about physical success, about making it the melting pot, making it in America. Then comes the scorpion, Akarov. The scorpion, its venom, person dies by getting cold, not raising temperature. The Yiddishkeit is completely cold. Just has no feelings for it anymore. Whole life is now the American dream. What's the next thing? A thirst, but there's no water. What happens here? This is the biggest tragedy. You can't repress a yid is longing for meaning. The life is empty, but he doesn't even know where to turn. There's no water. This generation is so alienated that they don't even know that the Torah, that's the answer to a life of meaning. And I remember, having discussions with, they're not kids, they were college graduates and successful people in the ashrams. He says, you're looking for meaning. I said, well, why? Judaism didn't occur to them. Yiddishkeit. There's any spirituality or anything at all. So going to ashrams in India. Tzimoyin, a thirst, but they don't have the water. They don't even know they have the water. It goes on to say, the last words of the verse is, God takes, but then God produced water for you, Moishe says, out of the rock. And I had to strike it in the end. In the end, the water is there. The heart is like a stone to Yiddishkeit, but we'll strike it. We'll stop you in the street. Are you Jewish? And force you, confront you. Are you Jew? And slowly open up and bring out the water. But the description is 5 descriptions that literally describe the 5 generations. And Moshe is warning them. It all starts with a big world. No, it's a big Eibishter. World is small little world compared to the big God. Remember who you are. Remember you're Yisrael, you're a Yid, and you have the ability. And that's what's happening today. The world is forcing us to confront that we're Yidden and we're different, and we have a message, and it's time to deliver. I just saw something very disturbing. I think it was on the news.
I'm just going to say that the story for Monday, the story for Monday that you were going to say, like, it's hard to keep us in suspense with.
Oh, that story for Monday? I'll tell you.
Sorry, it's saying something very disturbing.
No, I don't want to say it. It doesn't be broadcast. I mean, it's in the news, but I'll show it to you. We can't speak negatively about Yidden, Chas v'sholem, but I just want to say it's in our hands. At the end of the day, especially now, it's in our hands. So number one, if you know this, the world media, you know where it gets its information from? Israel starving children and it's genocide. Mainly the Haaretz newspaper, Tel Aviv University. I just got this last week. One of the departments put out a political science or whatever it is, encouraging people to write articles critical of Israel, calling it occupation and genocidal. It's coming out of Israel. The New York Times is Jewish owned. Who had that front page of a mother holding a starving child? It was the New York Times. Turns out, as you all know, this wasn't a starving child. This was a male. First of all, the mother's well fed, the kid starving. Does anybody with half an ounce of brains would buy that it's famine? You first give your child, then so she's robust and overweight, and she's holding the other pictures. There's children in cots, emaciated, and she's overweight. This makes sense to you? So we all know that these were children that have these degenerative diseases. The Hamas is, and this is a front page in the New York Times. So when they were confronted, page 16, a retraction. New York Times is Jewish owned. This is what's fueling this only, giving legitimacy. It's coming from us. And I'm just saying another story this morning out of Montreal. I don't want to say it because he's a friend of mine. I hope it's not true. You'll see it. I'll tell you. Okay. I'm sorry. It hurts. The next thing we want to learn now. Friends, you need a bit of background. You click on the text. It's text number 3. So I want to talk about the manna. So you need to know a little bit the Bikat Hamazon, the grace after meals. Since I'm mentioning, I'm just going to tell you, it's a beautiful thing. Yesterday, Ronnie, so I'm leaving MTC. So thank God this place is hopping and bumping and know what's going on. 5 buses roll up. I see the tables are all set. The whole Ivel, these few hundred children, ate last night's supper here. I got running home. End of the day, I have to run to the Black Rock Shiva. I got to go after I have to shiver. So I'm walking home. I get it. Joni was here. She calls, call back. What's going on? There's some kids want to put on the phone. So of course, I come back home. He stayed here till then. Lining up. I don't have to ask anybody. The kids are lining up to put on film. One of the kids, Richard, tells me, she's not going to believe this. His kids come from an absolute left, kibbutz, secular. He puts on film and he says to Richard, take a picture and send it to my father. I want Abba to see it put on film. What I want to tell you was, these are secular kids, for the most part, Bikat Hamazon, which we're learning about now. Every meal, they all sing the first paragraph of Banshee. How beautiful is that? How does it light up the heavens and the Nachas Hashem has? Yes, say what you want. I mean, that's incredible. Which is, you got to stay and hear the kids sing with gusto. Baruch Atah. I had to call Levi. Couldn't do it. Couldn't rap enough. One kid, another kid. Moved to tears. Okay, so look at the quote over here. Let's read it. So Bikat Hamazon, friends, has many paragraphs. You're going to get the history of how it was created. Let's read it together. Omar Rav Nachman said, Moishe tikkun Yisrael Bikat Hazon. The first paragraph, Hazon et ha'olam kolob. Moishe Rabbeinu instituted that b'shar sheyard le'man, when the manna fell. So you hear? The first paragraph of Bikat Hamazon is for the manna that fell in the desert, which is going to lead to a big question in a minute. But just get the big picture. The second one, Noed Elocha Hashem, talks about the land. Allah Shechalta Laveitenu. So Yeshua Tikkun Bikat Haaretz. he added it later. Kivan shenichnas, when they entered Eretz Yisrael, then Yeshua expanded over time, added another paragraph, thanking Hashem for the land. David Shlomo, then came King David and Shlomo's son, generations later, and the next one, Tiknu Yerushalayim, B'nai Yerushalayim, they talked about Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash. David tikkun al Yisrael lemech l'shleim berachad. David gave those words, bless your people and Yerushalayim, your city. It didn't mention the Mikdash, he didn't build it yet. For Shlomo tikkun, and he added al habayit hakadosh hakadosh. And then it was later modified. When it was destroyed, we kept the same words, but then asking to be rebuilt. But they were the ones that made that in stages. And the final one, Hatova Meitiv, that's after Vnei Yerushalayim, who's good and does good. That was instituted. Omrav Masna Oto Hayom Shenitnu Haroge Beital Likvura Tiknu Beyavna Hatova Meitiv. As you know, that the Romans destroyed Beitar. This was the end of the uprising, the end of Bar Kokhba's attempt, but almost successful, but then treachery, and they broke into Beitar and they slaughtered everybody. Rivers of blood, literally. And it was such a victory for the Romans that the Roman general did not allow the Jews of Beitar to be buried. In fact, they were piled as a fence around a vineyard so they could gloat over the dead Jews. This lasted for some period of time. I don't remember the number of years. And then the Caesar died, the new one, an act of clemency allowed the Jews of Beitar to be buried. That's when they added the final blessing, Hatova Meitiv, who is good and does good. Why the double expression? Hatov shlo yisrichu. The bodies did not decompose. This is a hot climate, the Middle East and the Israeli sun. It was for a number of years. And Vametiv, it does good, they were buried. There was such a big event in Jewish history that this was a whole new bracha was added, and then many requests, and the follow, and of Golus and redemption. So that's the history of the Birkat Hamazon. So the first paragraph, Moishe, that's for the manna. Second paragraph, Yeshua, the land. Third section, Yerushalayim Beit HaMikdash, David the Shlomo. And the fourth section is post Beitar, which is really our exile and the tragedy of exile, but the fact that God hasn't abandoned us. That's the fourth one. Now my question is this. If you look at the quote, let's go to, the top of the first quote. This is from the Parsha. We just started now, we'll finish next week. He afflicted you and he caused you hunger. And he gave you the man. And the simple meaning is, first you were hungry, afflicted, and then the manna came. But look at the next quote. The next quote on the page, which I gave you, is from the Medrash. Rabbi, you see it there? If you read the verse literally, it's describing the manna. The manna causes affliction, causes hunger. That's what the Medrash says. The manna induced hunger. Now, why did the manna induce hunger? The simple meaning is that since you didn't see the food, it tasted like anything you wanted, but it didn't look like it, and therefore it didn't satisfy. As we all know, when you eat a meal, it's not just the food, it's the visual, which is one of the reasons tonight we have Shabbat candles. One of the reasons is it's a mitzvah to delight in Shabbat, to eat the best foods. If you don't see what you're eating, you're not going to enjoy it. So the sages enacted, it goes back to the very beginning, to the prophets, that a woman like Shabbat candles to be light, to enjoy the family dinner together, also not to stumble and not to. The manna didn't have that visual appearance, therefore it caused like a dissatisfaction. So the Rebbe asked like this. So why are we saying that brach? We in the Nusach of Chabad and Svardim and Chassidim, we add at the end of that first blessing, invoking the pasuk, you shall eat, be satisfied, and bench. But if it doesn't satisfy, why would we be saying this bracha? The manna doesn't satisfy. We're not eating manna from heaven. We're not eating manna, and it didn't satisfy. So we'll leave this question unanswered. We're going to give two beautiful answers. Two levels remind me it's very beautiful of why our thinking of God, even though it's not manna from heaven, we do invoke it. And what's the virtue of not being satisfied? What does it mean? You have to be satisfied. That's the whole point. That's why you've been. The savata. So God willing, next week.
Right.
A wonderful Shabbos, everybody.